What are you drinking there? I have a cranberry cinnamon kombucha myself.
Is it Thanksgiving?
It is limited. It is like a holiday flavor, but it's still on the store shelves, so I'm still buying it.
I can't imagine why that's still on the store shelves. I have no idea.
I know, right? It's delicious.
Chris, you know what I'm drinking.
Of course, Mr. Pibb. Because you can't drink Dr. Pepper.
Mr. Pibb had a really weird slogan. I can't remember what it was. Put it in your head. Yeah, that's...
That's generally what you do with soda, I guess.
That it used to be like a drink Mr. Pibb. It goes down good. Like, that used to be what it was. But then, yeah, like when I was a kid and it had like the weird Doug-looking drawing on the...
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. Like, I don't know if you call that a mascot or what, but...
Put it in your head. That's what it was, literally.
And it had like the ridges on the can. Remember, it wasn't perfectly
they were like
cylindrical.
They were like angular. Like
so weird.
Man,
and then they came out with Pibb Extra, which I think there was a time when they were both on shelves at the same time. Pibb and Pibb Extra. It was like a ramped up version, but now it's just Pibb Extra, and I'm questioning if there's ever a difference between the two.
There wasn't. It was just a marketing thing. That's all it ever was.
They got me.
As far as I know, there was never a... I remember the first time I had Mr. Pibb, like I saw it, and my mom was like, "Here, drink this." And I was like, "What is this?"
You remember the first time in your life?
I remember one of the first, because like got it out of like a vending machine.
Okay.
Because like we were at like a public pool or something, and my mom was like, "Here's a Mr. Pibb," and I was like, "What is this?" And she's like, "It's like Dr. Pepper," and I was like, "All right," and I drank it, and I was like, "It's not Dr. Pepper, but all right, cool." And then it just entered the rotation. But yeah, when I got onto Mr. Pibb, it was when we were in the '90s with the Strange,
Had you had Dr. Pepper before?
Yeah, I'm sure I had.
Okay, so you knew this was like
but there's a time even before that where like Mr. Pibb had an even more like strange angular block writing logo.
Yeah.
And then they've just kept updating it to try to get people to care. And it's been Pibb Extra for, I mean, I guess 2023.
Yeah, they quit trying to innovate. Now. They have their audience.
I remember the whole joke originally, though, was that they came in 15 packs, not 12 packs. That was Pibb Extra. What Pibb Extra came with 3 extra cans. That was originally like the gimmick when they unveiled the name. And then everybody moved to the fridge packs. So now you can't do that.
Yeah, I remember when 12 packs were like big rectangles.
4x3.
Yes, and we used to have in the 90s a plastic can holder in our fridge that you loaded up and it would dispense them as you pulled one. And then, like you said, they came out with the fridge pack and everyone adopted it. And then that little innovation we had was rendered useless.
But yeah, the fridge pack is 6x2 and they used to be 4x3. Like it was all the rectangles or whatever. But I mean, they're still a rectangle.
What a silly innovation that took so long to be like, hey, what if we just made this box fit in the fridge?
I don't know. I think it was that thing where like before people would just put them flat, they'd put them however. But yeah, I don't know who came up with the fridge pack and put it in.
Well, I think most people don't like flat soda, Chris.
We've got like three options.
You know, honestly, I had something in my notes to talk to you about.
Then we can do that too.
No, it's fine. I'll save it. This is the episode. This is all staying in. All right, theme song.
We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my good gorilla co-host, Andrew Williams. Say something to the listeners, Andrew.
Something to the listeners.
Each week, we revisit a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Big Animal Month! And this week, we are talking the 1995 film Congo. Oh, I don't know if I can do the theme much this episode. I am getting over a pretty gnarly respiratory virus of some kind. I'm at the point where I'm not sick anymore, but I've got so much, I mean, I don't know, sorry guys, TMI, like mucus and drainage that I'm just hacking up a lung every 30 minutes. It's awful.
Hey, happens to the best of us.
Yeah, it truly does. Andrew, what is your history with this film, Congo? Did you see it in theaters, or had you seen it before, perhaps like on TBS growing up? This feels like where that movie lived for a long time.
I've definitely seen it before. I do not believe I saw it in theaters. This would have been 95. So this would have been the summer I turned 8. So I can't believe that I was really out there begging my parents to go see the new film from Michael Crichton. But I've definitely seen it before, especially when it entered the cable and broadcast television lexicon later in the 90s. I definitely have seen it before. It's definitely something that I think was part of the Williams vault, maybe taped off TV.
Sure.
I don't think we bought it. But yeah, so I've seen it before. I have not revisited it in a really long time, though. Have not gone back to this one. So I was curious going back, seeing what held up, what didn't, and just feeling the spirit of Big Animal Month.
Nice. I saw this growing up, probably not in theaters, like you said. 7 years old. I had not a huge Michael Crichton fan. I'd probably only read 3 or 4 of his books by then, so not a super fan just yet. But so much of this movie has stuck with me, especially Amy's voice. I mean, Amy, good gorilla. I say, no joke, at least once a month that's coming out of my mouth. there's never any good context for it, but the specific that voice is just so distinctive. And it's one of those movies I know I saw a few times growing up, and then years later you think back, you're like, God, that was a heck of a movie. Do I remember this right? There's a gorilla with a power glove on that did sign language, and it talked, and diamonds and lasers, and it's such a weird 90s oddity. The last time I watched it before preparing for this podcast, though, was probably at some point shortly after high school. Me and friends, we would, this is the peak of the nostalgia critic and YouTube videos about old movies from your childhood. So we would watch these movies together to mock them and make fun of them or laugh at them or whatever. This is definitely one that we revisited then at that time. And, now I went back with a different perspective, a different goal, looking for the positives as we do here. And it's a heck of a thing, Andrew. We're going to talk all about it. But first, let's set the stage a bit here. The movie is released June 9th, 1995, made on a budget of $50 million. Pretty big budget. At the box office, it brings in $152 million. We got ourselves a modest hit here. Critically, however, it is not well received. You might even say it was panned. 23% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is based on just over 50 reviews, so a decent sample size for the time period. But you read through those, and they're Andrew, they're not great.
No, they are not. It is pretty surprising. I didn't think it was that low. But yeah, 23% is pretty bad. And this is 52 reviews, so it's not, like I said, movies now get 200, 300, sometimes even 400 reviews making up their critic pool, so it's definitely smaller, and they're all historical for the most part. But yeah, this is not something that made a lot of waves at the time. It has not, critically been reevaluated since to kind of get that cult following. And so yeah, it is it's an odd one. Even this one, the audience score is just 29%. So I mean, it's people are going online to say Congo is bad. That's what it is.
People are spending their time. Now, Andrew,
Yep.
I've wanted to visit Roger Ebert's reviews on all these movies we're covering this month, so this one's no different. Roger Ebert reviewed Congo back in 95. He opens it by saying, Congo is a splendid example of a genre no longer much in fashion, the jungle adventure story. So that's his framing for how he's looking at this movie. He wraps it up like this. Here's the final paragraph. The closing action sequences, involving the lost city of Zinj, the volcanic eruption, and the attack of the killer apes, is in the tradition of the Indiana Jones movies, although the traffic direction isn't as good and a lot more porters disappear without being accounted for. The movie was directed by Frank Marshall, who has worked with Steven Spielberg on his action extravaganzas, and is based on a novel by Michael Crichton, who is said to be unhappy about what they've done with his book. Since it is impossible to imagine this material being played for anything but laughs, maybe he should be grateful. Now that sounds really harsh there at the end, but this is a positive review. He gave it a thumbs up. He gave it 3 out of 4 stars. Pretty decent. I mean, he's being sincere when he says it's like a throwback to a lost era, of Hollywood. And I think when he says played for laughs, he just means like, there's nothing deep going on here. It's just a fun adventure in the jungle. That was his read. Positive review. Going against the grain, as we established, with most of the critics of the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he calls out that, like, you know, it's reminiscent of, like, Indiana Jones, because, you know, I guess this is as good a time as anything to talk about it. That was kind of Crichton's idea here. Crichton wanted to craft this is basically after the success of the first Great Train Robbery, which was just known as the Great Train Robbery in the United States, but it was a like heist comedy film directed and written by Michael Crichton based off his book of the same name. Came out in 1978, made a little bit of money, but in the aftermath of that, he wanted to write a screenplay specifically, oddly enough, for Sean Connery to play an Alan Quatermain-esque great white hunter type.
And what's the irony of that, Andrew?
The irony of that is that Sean Connery would retire before ever playing Alan Quatermain on screen. No, I take it back. The irony of that, Chris, is that clearly Sean Connery's last on-screen live-action acting role was playing Alan Quatermain in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Andrew.
Or for all of you kids in the know,
there it is.
LXG.
Yes.
But anyway, Michael Crichton specifically wanted to write a screenplay for Sean Connery to play. He wasn't going to be called Alan Quatermain, but he was going to be called Charles Monroe. And it was going to be envisioned as like an homage to classic pulp adventure tales. King Solomon's Mines and stuff like that. The stories that Alan Quatermain was in. And he successfully pitched that to them, to 20th Century Fox, in 1979. Like, the year after Great Train Robbery comes out.
It's like as he's writing the book, like I think before the book is published, he's already pitching the movie. I'm pretty
sure the deal was to write the book, write the screenplay, and direct the movie. I think that's what his deal was. So he was going to write the book Congo, which he does, and it comes out. And it's probably one of his more classic novels. People know what it is. So the book does come out, and he does write a version of the screenplay, I'm guessing. But he supposedly leaves the project when he finds out he can't use a real gorilla to play Amy. I don't know how true that is. That seems like a strange thing to believe you could do in 1980. But I've bopped around to several different directors, went back and forth. And then eventually we get to our current version, and we'll talk more about the creatives that bring it to life here in a minute. But the joke is that even apparently like guys like Steven Spielberg were offered it. The idea that, the guy who made Indiana Jones could eventually direct a movie that's meant as like a send-up of those pulp adventures, which is literally what Indiana Jones is, was just ironic. So I think the history of this movie isn't, like, obviously just, it's filled with a lot of weird turns, but just the idea that, the whole idea was to get Sean Connery, who's in Great Train Robbery, to be clear. That it wasn't just like after he made a successful movie, Michael Crichton was like, you know what, I should make a movie where Sean Connery plays like Alan Quatermain. Like that, he worked with Sean Connery on Great Train Robbery, and so that was why he was kind of jazzed to work with him again. And it's interesting how it kind of gets where it is. And it's another one of those projects. We've talked about plenty of them, where there's just tons of different versions, takes a long time to get it to the finish line, and then some would say that by the time it gets to the finish line, it so doesn't resemble the thing it was intended as, you're kind of left questioning the motivations. But, like I said, Michael Crichton's name, actually, by the end of this, is not on, actually, any of the screenplay. It's just he gets credit for writing the book, but the screenplay eventually doesn't have his name on it. So it does depart eventually very heavily from what he did. And yeah, we end up where we are now. Talking about this movie 30 years later.
The sole writing credit goes to John Patrick Shanley. Now, he is a very successful playwright and occasional screenwriter. In fact, his first screen credit was for Moonstruck, and he wins the Academy Award right out the gate for Best Screenplay. Some other credits in his filmography include Joe versus the Volcano and We're Back, a dinosaur story, that weird animated dinosaur movie from the 90s that we all remember, but actually bombed at the box office. That's got to be a future episode of this podcast. We'll get around to it. Also wrote the screenplay for Doubt, the critically acclaimed film based on his own play. So he adapted it himself.
Also directs that one.
And steps into the directing chair. So very talented gentleman this is.
Like you said, tons of credits on the stage. That's definitely why, like, you look at his list here, it's still out there too, doing new plays. Literally a play that debuted just last year. He has another one I really like. He wrote called The January Man. This is a really, really funny. Kevin Kline plays this like ex-NYPD detective who gets like called out of service when a serial killer is terrorizing the city. Doesn't sound like it should be funny, but it's very funny. Harvey Keitel plays his police commissioner brother, and it's just super, super funny. Susan Sarandon, Harvey Keitel, Alan Rickman's in there too. Just very, very funny. Doesn't surprise me at all that he wrote that. But yeah, like you said, I was surprised. Like, I expected the guy who wrote Congo would kind of be like the people who wrote like Anaconda. Like, there's no Wikipedia page for them. Like,
yeah,
I was kind of surprised to find that not just the person who write this have a sizable career, but just like a long career. I mean, he's been doing things since '82, and he's still out there now, with plenty of acclaim to his name. So not a lightweight, as some would say. He's got an Academy Award. He's got a Writers Guild of America Award. He's got a Pulitzer Prize. He's got a Tony Award. This man almost has an EGOT. Like, he's a Grammy away from having the EGOT. He's got the Academy Award, the Tony, and the EGOT is the Emmy, the Grammy, the Oscar, and the Tony. So he's missing two, but he's got a Pulitzer Prize. That's better. He's got the EGOP. But he's been nominated for Golden Globes. He's been nominated for everything. For Doubt, Moonstruck won a lot of awards when it came out. Moonstruck has a particularly great monologue from Nicolas Cage, if you've never seen it. He's got like a wooden hand in the movie. He goes on the weirdest rant about it. But yeah, looking at his career after I saw that he's the guy that wrote Congo, I was like, wait, I know all sorts of this stuff. This is ridiculous. This is wild. But yeah.
Well, now you got me wondering
didn't see it coming.
If anyone has the EGOT, if anyone does have a Pulitzer that has the EGOT, or do you think someone's got to have the EGOTM, right? Of course, being the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, and Mark Strong Award. I wonder if we've awarded.
No way to find out.
No way to check. No way to know. But I do, Andrew. I do wonder. This movie is directed by Frank Marshall. This is so interesting. First off, this man's career is legendary. Along with his wife and producing partner, Kathleen Kennedy, their credits are insane. And they're responsible for shepherding in some of Hollywood's best and biggest hits of all time for like 3 decades plus. Things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Signs, the Bourne movies. But what's really interesting, well, 2 things here. Sidebar. First off, Kathleen Kennedy, been crushing it as a producer for decades. I just say that because I know there's like some younger people on the internet that just know she's responsible for Disney Star Wars. And they're like, who is this lady they brought in to be in charge of Star Wars? Like, children, sit down. She is an absolute legend. But what's really interesting here is that Frank Marshall occasionally directs the movies he produces. And I mean very occasionally.
Very occasionally.
His entire filmography as a director is Arachnophobia, a movie called Alive that I'm not familiar with, Congo, takes like an almost 10-year break, or over 10 years, and comes back for 8 Below. The Paul Walker movie about sled dogs. Like, what is it about these 4 movies where he was like, I'm going to produce this, but guys, I got this one. I'm going to step into that directing chair and take out. I don't know if these are movies that he had trouble finding a director, so he did this just to make sure they happened, or if he had a personal connection to them, or was really drawn to these stories that he wanted to be the one to be on set. It's. I hope.
What
so.
I do
I want
find
to ask if I
interesting-
ever get to interview Frank Marshall, I want to be, why Congo? Why 8 Below?
Like, I do find it interesting, though, that he directs Alive and he also directs 8 Below. Now, Alive is based off a true story, which was about an Uruguayan rugby crash in the Andes Mountains, and was about that team surviving that crash in the mountains. 8 Below is a movie about a similar, like, isolation type survival incident. So he has 2 movies about groups being stuck in snowy environments trying to survive. Then he has a movie about spiders and a movie about gorillas. So apparently he's like, if they're not trying to survive in the winter, don't care. If they're not spiders or gorillas, I don't care. Like, he just doesn't want to touch it otherwise.
Yeah, I guess arachnophobia
Weird creature
and
movie,
Congo are
snowy
both
survival.
like animals that are typically not trying to kill humans, that in these stories are trying to kill
There's
humans.
no like, sorry, I know spiders are a touchy subject for you, but like, there's no giant spiders like out of like, there's no like creature-sized spiders in arachnophobia. It's just regular spiders, right?
I did see
Never
that
seen
movie
it,
as a
have you?
kid. I will never watch it again.
Right. Of
What
course.
I remember is Jeff Daniels, right? No. It's John
It
Goodman.
is Jeff Daniels.
It's John
both of
Goodman. They're both in
Jeff
there.
Daniels and John Goodman. Yes.
Are you
It's the greatest
serious?
movie of all time.
What?
I'm not kidding.
I
It's genuinely like, I know you'll never watch it again.
I did not know
understandably so,
Jeff
but, like,
Daniels was in it because the one scene I remember is John Goodman shooting a spider with a crossbow. Like it's
yes.
just so yeah. So
John Goodman plays the exterminator, like
Okay.
that they bring in to help fight the spiders, but like Jeff Daniels is like the scientist, like studying the situation.
The
like,
spider is big
it's-
enough to be shot with a crossbow, so that's pretty big. Maybe
So,
not
It's
supernatural
pretty
big.
and I think
but
there's
it's
like a
big.
queen spider that shows up, and so
Ugh.
yeah.
See, you don't call an
Yeah,
exterminator. You
yeah.
call an arsonist. You collect the insurance money and you move on with your life. You burn the house down. It's gone. It's gone to the spiders
Yep.
now. Yeah. You know, another movie I saw, like, it's weird. My fear of spiders has grown over. I've always been freaked out by them, but like, it's gotten
Yeah.
out of control as a guy. I don't know why. I should probably figure out what's going on there. But I remember seeing the movie 8-Legged Freaks in theaters.
Yes.
I'm thinking it was a good
Yeah,
time.
that-
And I feel like I might be able to watch because it's so. They're not. I don't know. They're realistic looking, but they're so big and it's so cartoony and over the top that.
There's like a threshold. There's a threshold where like it dips so far into the fantastic that like the perceived real threat ceases to exist.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. 'Cause I remember I'll watch things like I remember watching one of the Harry Potters and someone was like, "Oh, Chris, you're not going to want to watch this part," but now I'm trying to remember because I think they were like spider-like creatures in the woods. I don't think they were actual spiders, but they were like
Yeah.
enough like them. That's what it was evoking. But if it's not a realistic spider depiction, it's not going to freak me out. So I don't know. Weird thing. Yeah, Frank Marshall, he had to take this one himself, and boy, heck of a thing he did here. Let's dive into it though, Andrew. Let's talk about this movie, all the positives, everything we like about the 1995 film Congo. Are you ready?
Yes.
When the communications company Travacom loses connection to their research team in the jungles of Africa, they send Karen Ross to investigate and recover the rare diamonds needed for the company's next big innovation. Karen hitches a ride to the Congo with Peter Elliott, a primatologist who's going to Africa to release the intelligent gorilla Amy into the wild. The expedition is funded by a philanthropist named Herkimer, named Herkimer, with his own motivations of finding the lost city of Zinj. and the treasure it is rumored to obtain. The group is able to find the city with the help of Monroe Kelly, a safari guide. But once there, they discover the grisly fate of the original team at the hands of a vicious species of gorilla. Andrew, there is a lot going on here. We say that a lot, usually half jokingly, but we've got 4 different parties with all their own motivations, and I didn't even cover the part where they have to travel through various warring countries and all the politics of that to get to the location. It's a pretty dense story, oddly, for a story about a lost city of riches.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that. I was like, there's a lot of moving parts here that definitely surprised me. I genuinely, I think by the time they get settled in Africa, we're almost an hour into the movie. And so it takes a long time to get to that point, and there's only like 45 minutes of the movie left at that point. So, yeah, there is a piece of this that's kind of a little bit of a remake of, like, you know, King Solomon's Mines. That's a little bit of the, you know, the Lost City, the diamonds, all of that. That's kind of really playing in that same kind of area. So this really is kind of, I wouldn't say stealth, but it's definitely kind of a very, like, it's definitely a story once you get into the gist of the Lost City and the diamonds and all of that very much is playing in those kind of classic Alan Quatermain type adventures. And those books it's interesting reading those because it's the same issue that I think something like John Carter has that I've mentioned before. And I probably talked about this on our LXG episode, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, for you normals out there. But
I thought you were going to say on our John Carter episode, because we also covered that.
But I'm thinking additionally also on LXG, but just You have these classic stories where you've got a character like John Carter or you've got a character like Alan Quatermain, and people will read these stories and be like, oh, well, this is just Indiana Jones. Like, you know, people read Alan Quatermain and they're like, oh, this is just Indiana Jones type stuff. And it's like, yeah, but like Alan Quatermain was like 60 years before Indiana Jones, guys. Like, it's that thing where, like, the modern version of the story has become the known version.
Yeah.
So the older version seems not anachronistic necessarily, but it seems almost not as interesting because you're like, oh, well, I've seen this already. It's not, you know, I've seen Indiana Jones. I don't really need to read a story about a guy doing the exact same thing. The kind of the innovation or the creativity that was on display in those original stories gets lost because you've seen it so much. It's a little bit like like I've mentioned it before too, the experience you had with Akira, where you've seen so much stuff that's influenced by Akira.
Exactly what I was about to bring
watch
up,
Akira, you kind of are like, oh, well, this is cool, but like I've seen all these other things that are kind of playing in this same sandbox. The monumental nature of the original that did it all the first time withers away a little bit when you've seen all the stuff that's influenced by it. And so stuff like Alan Quatermain, John Carter with sci-fi, like you watch a John Carter story, the whole fish out of water sci-fi story, things by Isaac Asimov, even stuff like Star Wars later, makes some of that stuff seem like, oh, well, this is kind of not even necessarily redundant. People are like, it's just not as interesting because the nature of that original story and the groundbreaking things that it did gets a little lost. It's like rewatching the original Star Wars now almost. People are like, oh, well, this is cool, but like, you know, we've come a long way. You compare it to something like Dune, like, you know, Villeneuve's Dune or something. People are like, oh, well, the effects, we've come so long. It's like, yeah, but at that time in that place, those effects were unbelievable. You hadn't seen anything like it. So Quatermain definitely
just
runs
the
into that
sound
same
effects
problem.
in Star Wars are so unique to
the
Star
sound
Wars.
of Star Wars, I think, is actually what makes it more Star Wars more than anything.
Yeah,
like there's certain sounds,
the
in
blasters
Star Wars,
and the
well
ships,
the doors, the everything, the Wilhelm scream occasionally. Although that's just been Indiana Jones too.
Andrew, this morning,
yeah,
I was watching Paw Patrol. My son's been really into Paw Patrol, and Paw Patrol has all these like mini series. They're kind of like Power Rangers. Like this one is Mighty Pups, and this one's Dino Pups, and all have the different like themes. So this morning we were watching Moto Pups, and in this special, like they have motorcycles. That's the big twist. Their vehicles are motorcycles now. There is a daredevil cat, and there's this scene in the first episode where this cat jumps a canyon on a motorcycle, and when it lands, they do the Akira slide. shot of the motorcycle sliding away from the camera. And I was like, it's unreal how influential that movie is as a whole, but that motorcycle slide, any animated thing, sometimes not animated, is gonna recreate that slide at some point. Like
Sonic 3.
It's never a coincidence when they do it. It is always an homage to Akira.
But just even the notion of jumping over the canyon, that's an Evel Knievel thing. Like, that's another reference already baked in there that some kid is going to have no idea.
Here I was
about.
thinking Paw Patrol was innovating our entertainment, and it's just ripping off the classics.
It's just ripping off the classics. But who would have thought the Paw Patrol was not the place? But like you mentioned that, even Sonic 3, Shadow does the Akira slide at one point in that movie. Like, it's that.
Have we talked about how good a Sonic 3 is on the podcast yet?
I don't think we talked about it on the podcast, but we could certainly mention that Sonic 3 is, I would say, the best of all of those movies, and it's far better than it has any right to be.
100%. The first movie.
Not to say that a Sonic movie can't be good, I guess. But just I didn't expect it to be that good.
Well, the first movie is okay. So we all know what happened with the animation in the first movie. They redesigned Sonic after the poor reception of the trailer and stuff. But my thing was okay, he looks cool now, but he still says meow for no reason. The writing and all the other problems I have with the trailer are still there. And my take on that first movie is you watch it for Jim Carrey. He's doing his classic shtick. We haven't seen him do in a long time. Hashtag PP. It's the only thing I enjoy about that first movie. The design of Sonic is cool, I guess. The second movie is basically more of the same. They turned down some of the human subplots, which are kind of boring in the second one, so that was an improvement. But it's still like the Jim Carrey show as far as I'm concerned. So I took my family to see Sonic 3 in theaters because I look for any opportunity to take my son. He's only 4. Any movie he can see in theaters I want to do so I can actually go to the movie. So we go see Sonic 3, and I had heard by now, it's the best one. It's pretty good. But, those first two had their fans too, so I'm not really expecting anything much different. It's like a genuinely great action movie. The action sequences are designed so well. The characters all have great motivation. The villain, Shadow, Keanu, is awesome. I've got no complaints about it. I mean, and again, they continue to turn down some of the human side plots because it's not as interesting, but even the human parts that they do have, little side missions, are very entertaining. It gets emotional at times, which I didn't expect to be that affected by a Sonic movie. I was certain. I was like, okay, who took over this franchise? This felt like, what's his name that came into Fast and Furious and rejuvenated that franchise?
Justin Lin.
I wanted to say Jeremy Lin. I knew that was wrong. I think that's the Lin Sanity. I think it's the basketball player. Justin Lin. Thank you. It felt like someone like Justin Lin must have come on board. But no, it's the same creative team. It's the same writer and director as the first two movies. So I don't know what changed, but my God, that third Sonic movie is really good.
It's unbelievably good. I just was shocked. I saw it, I think, when I was home around Christmas. I think I took my brother and his girlfriend to go see Sonic. And I was, and the thing is I have no barometer for Sonic games. I've never played any Sonic games, really. I've been told again that I should. I
mean, I played Sega era, but nothing that has a story. I don't really know the personality.
Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, I guess, are the ones that people recommend. I guess Sonic Adventure 2 is where you get the Shadow stuff, maybe. It's kind of what I heard, but I also had a friend that came in out of nowhere and was like, I'm going to be honest with you, Sonic games are mid. He was
well, I know there's a ton of Sonic games, and I think even diehard fans say 10% of them are great.
Great, but anyway, so Battletoads, that's for sure. But it's so I have no barometer. The music, the live and learn thing. Everybody was really jazzed that they did that with the Sonic Shadow team up, and I had no barometer for any of that. I'm watching this as blind as I can on this story. And I was like, this is really, really good. I did see the discourse online that there were people in the theater that when Shadows, they were cheering, which if you have no context makes it seem like people are cheering for a
I guess
and-
spoilers for Sonic 3.
Yeah, sorry. But but the thing is that it was this thing where like then you were watching people justify it because what their argument was that it meant they weren't afraid to embrace the darker aspects of Sonic lore.
Yeah.
Which, if you say the phrase out loud, embrace the darker aspects of Sonic lore, unironically, I'm telling you right now, bud, go outside and touch some grass. But also, you can be glad that they're not. You can be glad that they're embracing the darker aspects of Sonic.
I mean,
lore
there's nothing wrong.
and
If
not
you're a big
cheering
Sonic fan, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm trying to think of the
There's
most
something
obscure
wrong.
thing.
Just
I don't know. I love Metroid. I cannot wrap my head around what a movie would look like, but I would be very interested to see one. And if they,
I'm just saying, don't cheer for like it's all I'm saying, Chris. Just don't do it.
Okay, I get it. Okay, Andrew, there is a huge fan of the movie Congo that found our podcast because of this episode, and right now they're wondering why the hell we're talking about Sonic. So let's instead talk about the cast
Congo.
of this movie, starting with the high point, the best casting, best performance in the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Congo?
So, ironically enough, this movie was intended by Michael Crichton to be a vehicle for Sean Connery. That role, he writes, Peter Monroe, as Monroe Kelly, as it eventually becomes. I believe Charles Monroe is the original name they were going to use for the character. He becomes this Captain Monroe Kelly, is played by alum of the show, Ernie Hudson. Now, this is one of those movies that I always knew Ernie Hudson was in. This is one of those things that like people pointed to after Ghostbusters as one of the bigger things that he was in. But I actually really like what he's doing with this character. He's playing, obviously, a very smart character who's intelligent to this area of the world. He knows all the different, facets and pieces of these kind of intricacies of all the ways these countries are interacting with each other. Africa can be a rather unstable region at times, especially at that time. There are countries that were on maps one week and not the next week, and they came back in other weeks, and lines and territories were continually in dispute, and it created a lot of uncertainty. But he comes in as this character, kind of a lived-in character who feels lived in, like it feels like he actually has this knowledge, not that he's just saying it. When he's running into certain people that are in this expedition, like he knows who they are. Like they really build this character out in a really good way, I think, is making him this source of knowledge that doesn't just feel like he's reading a textbook to you. They're able to make that knowledge come from him in a rather organic way. And Ernie Hudson brings that to life in a really cool way. Don't know about the accent. The accent seems a little shaky sometimes, but but overall, I really like what he's doing with the character. It's a stacked cast, generally speaking, but I think he manages to stand out in a big way. And the movie's all the better for having him in it. So straight to the top. Mark Strong Award winner, Ernie Hudson. Happy to do it.
Andrew, I have to agree. My Mark Strong Award is also going to Ernie Hudson. I really like this performance, and not to sound backhanded towards the rest of the cast. There's a lot of actors' performances I like, but he seems the most effortless. He seems like he's having a good time. Some of these other characters got to ride a little bit more of this. They got to ride the serious train, and that takes them far away from Funville, where Ernie Hudson is the mayor. How's that for an analogy?
There you go.
he's having a good time, and he does this really cool thing where, like, he is effortlessly cool as hell. Right? They're in the midst of this danger and jungle, the wild animals, and warring countries, and he keeps a level head the entire time. But also, he's very funny in a way that's not like a grating comic relief character. And also, I was considering this scene for my favorite scene. I'm going to go somewhere else. But there's a scene where another character comes face to face with wild gorillas. And Ernie Hudson is telling him, like, you have to stay still. It's like, I know, I read the books. And this character, like, doesn't move the gorilla loses interest and moves on. And then whenever the character turns around, Ernie Hudson is hiding in the bushes. And he just pops up and goes,
Yep.
"You did good."
I love that scene. It goes even further where he's like, "What were you doing?" And he was like, "Hiding."
Yeah.
No delusions about what he was doing.
Very
And
funny.
I do love that scene. But no, that just speaks to, like you said, it's very effortless. That's the great way to describe it. Of like, it just, he appears in these scenes without issue, and it just, it just feels very effortless. That's a good way to put it. But yeah, it's a stacked cast, and so being able to kind of stand upon it and kind of be the standout is not an easy task, but he is up to it. I mean, Ernie Hudson, we talked about him in the Ghostbusters episodes, or the Ghostbusters episode. Any other things? I don't know that he's been on the show before.
Well, we did Ghostbusters 2016 where he has a cameo, so we probably
he
made
has
a
a
point to
cameo
talk
there,
about
so
him
he's
there.
been there twice. I'm trying to think if we talked about him any other times. I don't think so. We haven't done The Crow. I know he's in The Crow. We haven't done Airheads. Somehow, I don't know how we haven't done Airheads, but
We'll get there.
We should. We'll get there. It's gonna happen, folks. But anyway, he's just a great character actor. I mean, he's been everywhere. Miss Congeniality. He was a FBI assistant director, but Oz. He was on the television show for a long time. All over the place. Just a fantastic character actor and a super nice guy. I think I mentioned on our Ghostbusters episodes that he's one of those ones that kind of keeps the torch lit, kept the torch lit for Ghostbusters in a big way for a long time. Even still, like if you go meet him at a con, chances are he'll have the suit on just because he wants fans to have that experience. So I do need to go meet him at a con, maybe show him my goalie helmets and see if he's impressed. But just cool.
Andrew, as Ghostbusters fan number one over here, towards the final scenes of this movie, they're at the Lost City. He's dressed in a almost jumpsuit attire. He's got the super long gun. He's holding it at his hip. Did you get a Ghostbuster vibe there? Like he was holding a wand? A little bit, right?
A little bit there. A little bit. I won't necessarily say it was intentional, but I feel like it wasn't not intentional either.
Yeah, I agree with that. The star of this movie is another alum of the show. Laura Linney stars as Karen Ross. Now, she is simply an employee at Travacom, but it's strongly implied she used to do work for the CIA, but she cannot confirm nor deny this. She is certainly handy with gadgets and tools and electronics and seems to be very capable with firearms and other things. Very quick on her feet and able to help them survive in the dangers of this jungle. Laura Linney, we talked about her on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, aka the third best Ninja Turtles movie, come at me. And on that episode, I almost...
Well, what's 1 and 2?
In order or just in general, the first two?
In general.
I mean, the two
Mutant
movies
Mayhem,
are
right?
1990 and Mutant Mayhem. Those are the two movies.
Yeah, okay.
And
I wasn't sure because you used to tell me that you kind of lumped TMNT 90 and TMNT 2 together. I wasn't sure if that was somehow making the cut here.
I mean, no. I mean, I like Secret of the Use and all, but there's a clear quality difference between the original and that one.
All right, moving on.
Yeah. Now, what order I put those first two in, that's tough.
Don't ask me.
I mean, anyway.
No, I just said don't ask me.
Okay, moving on.
Go away.
On that episode, on our episode with on Out of the Shadows, you and friend of the show, Brett, who was on that episode, kind of jumped down my throat because I almost didn't talk about Laura Linney in the cast. I was like, oh, and by the way, she plays this character and moved on. And y'all were like, whoa, show some respect for Laura Linney. So now we get to do that. She's a star of this movie. She would later star in The Truman Show, and she's in Mothman Prophecies, which, hey, we might cover that on the show. Does anybody remember that movie exists? It certainly qualifies for a podcast.
I remember it exists. I remember very little else.
I remember that's the first time I saw the trailer for Resident Evil when I saw Mothman Prophecies in theaters. I remember a bridge collapses in that movie, and I remember I fell asleep in theaters. Only because it was super late, not because it was bad. I don't remember much else about the movie, but yeah, maybe we will revisit it. But Laura Linney holding her own here in this movie.
Yeah, like I said, a character that eventually gets to get in on the action too. Like she doesn't just sit back and kind of is like, oh, we're just gonna let stuff happen around me. Like towards the finales of this movie, towards the finale of this movie, she is knee deep in the action with everybody else. It's actually the lead male actor that kind of takes more of a backseat there.
Yeah. She's a female lead of an action movie in the 90s and doesn't kiss someone in the climax. It's kind of nice.
Right. It's pretty nice. And then, like I said, her career speaks for itself. Right after this, she would go and do Primal Fear, which is, pretty well known. Kind of, what would you call that? Like
I don't know. I haven't seen it, but you told me to watch it. Edward Norton's in that?
Edward Norton, Richard Gere.
I think I said something about Edward Norton always has the energy that he's got something sinister just under the surface. And you're like, oh, bro, you got to watch Primal Fear. So I got to check that out.
Don't read much else about it before you watch it.
Okay.
But yeah, she's great. She's fantastic, great actress. Obviously, television stuff like The Big C, Ozark, just a powerhouse. Powerhouse with great, fantastic ability. Here, like I said, she gets to get in on the action. There's a little bit more going on, but she's one of several plot points happening in this movie. So maybe doesn't quite get as much chance to stand out as she otherwise might.
Dylan Walsh plays Peter Elliott, the primatologist that works with Amy the gorilla. This guy with his curly mullet, the most 90s looking movie guy, maybe second only to Paul Reese. But I think like a 90s dude, 90s white dude in a movie, it's this look right here. I like this performance though. I like that he I don't know, he's the one that was standing up to the gorilla that I talked about that scene earlier, and he doesn't move even though Ernie Hudson goes and hides in the bushes. He's clearly in over his head when he's in the jungle. He's a scientist. He's a lab guy. He works one-on-one with this gorilla. He's not cut out for this adventuring, but manages to make it to the end of the movie. I like it. Like his character, he's doing some heavy lifting because he has a big relationship with Amy the gorilla, who is a person in a monkey suit. That's who he's acting against. And he, you buy that relationship that they have, the almost paternal type relationship, and he's got to eventually say goodbye to her when she's released into the wild. So it's quite a tall task, I would imagine, to play against, again, a gorilla suit, but old Dylan Walsh is up to it. I'm not familiar with a lot of his credits, but I know he was on Nip Tuck, which was a huge show for a time in the aughts. He's the lead of that show, so that might be where most people know him from these days.
In that show with other alum of our show, Julian McMahon.
That all connects.
Yeah, he's got a weird task here. He really does. Like, it's a weird thing to say, but he basically has to act against a human in a gorilla suit. That being said, I believe the relationship. Like, I believe that there's a very paternal, protective nature that he has over Amy. He wants to make sure that Amy is protected at all times. Cares a lot for it. So all of that comes through. So despite the fact that it is a tall ask, I would say that he is more than up to the task. And makes it feel believable, like you said, to the point that when he has to say farewell, I wouldn't say, I'm weeping or, but there's definitely a moment of just oh, this is hitting more than I expected it would.
Yeah. Tim Curry plays Herkimer Homolka. He's a Romanian.
Herkimer Homolka almost sounds like the noise he makes when he's doing that.
It's what a Tim Curry accordion sounds like. If you, Tim Curry playing a character with an accent. I don't know if I've ever heard this.
He always has an accent, man.
Yes, his own accent though. Presumably, he came out of the womb talking like that. I don't know if I've ever.
Came out of the womb going.
That's how he cry. That's how he goo goo gaga. How do you? Mommy. I can't. Okay.
Sorry, folks. Moving on. Oh God.
Would you be surprised to know I did a little bit of day drinking today, Andrew? Friend of the show, my wife. Here's what happened. She is getting really into fresh pineapple. I don't know if you know about pineapple. If you buy it already cut up, it's really expensive. It's like $8 for a little tub of pineapple cubes. So we've been buying fresh pineapple, and she's learned to like carve it herself. But today, we use this gadget that she got on Amazon, which cores the pineapple. You just cut the top off, it cores it, it pulls all out, pre-sliced. It's amazing, but you're left with this pineapple husk that's basically a cup with pineapple juice at the bottom. So I poured a little bit of rum in it and stuck a straw in it, and I drank it straight out of the pineapple, and it was delicious. Then I had to come record a podcast and talk about Tim Curry and his noises. So now everyone's caught up. Andrew, Tim Curry talking with an accent is very weird because it's still pretty over-the-top performance. I'm not an expert. I don't know if this is a spot-on Romanian accent or not, but it's a weird thing because Tim Curry is this guy with clearly, I want to say nefarious motivations, but not really. He's pretty upfront about what he's after. He wants to fund this expedition because Amy the gorilla has been painting pictures of the jungle where she's from, and she's painting this golden eye, which is supposedly part of the lost city of Zinj, which he's been looking for. So he thinks that Amy's going to lead them to this lost city, even though Amy never directs anybody on where to go, so I don't know. Did you know? Like,
there is a scene. There is a scene where she does lead them. Like they have two ways they can go, and Amy says this way. Like she tells them, but it's way.
And it just happens to be where they were researching, where Bruce Campbell's team was researching. It's that's just a coincidence, right? That Amy is going home to the place where Laura Linney needs to go. I don't know this anyway.
Like they don't know where Amy's gonna go, but like Laura Linney does hypothetically know exactly where she needs to go. Well, and then Laura Linney is leading them at one point because she has like the tracker,
right?
But then that breaks and it stops working. So at that point, they have to like rely on Amy, I guess, to get where they're going. I don't know, Chris.
Okay.
I'm starting to understand why it's a 23.
Anyway, Tim Curry wants to find this lost city, but he doesn't really hide it from people. I think people know why he's doing it, but it's always implied that like he has ulterior motives, but he's just a guy that wants to find some diamonds. Eventually finds the diamonds, but is killed by these freaky gorillas. I enjoy this performance because I always enjoy Tim Curry, alum of the show. Mark Strong Award winner. He definitely picked one up in our Clue episode. Can't always verify these things, but that I do remember. It's Tim Curry. Always happy to see him, especially 90s Tim Curry. That's the Tim Curry I grew up with.
Is that peak? That's peak Tim Curry for you? Like
I think so. I mean, Home Alone 2. This, I didn't grow up with Clue as we established. So I think 90s Tim Curry is what I was watching. Not his last role as a jungle man, The Wild Thornberrys. Nigel Thornberry, which is
still doing that?
There's no way. I mean, they're not making Wild Thornberrys anymore. Can't, does he have? I know he can talk. Does he still sound like Tim Curry?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Good for him. I don't know.
Let's see.
They meet the Rugrats in a movie. I know there's that. But that was a long time ago, Andrew.
Rugrats Go Wild was a crossover between the Rugrats and the Wild Thornberry.
And what year was that, Andrew?
03.
22 years ago.
All right. Anyway, Tim Curry is still out there doing his thing, such as he is now capable of. But Tim Curry, yeah, for me it's tough because like Clue is like the image of Tim Curry I like have in my head. Like that's the version of Tim Curry. But like obviously I know people where it's like the stuff in the 90s, and then there's other people that like Rocky Horror is their image of Tim Curry, and that was 75. So I mean, there is that's what they say is like it's It's like the era. There's so many eras of which you can define Tim Curry, but yeah, for me, it's got to be Clue for me. Like, even though I wasn't alive when Clue came out, but like that's the image when I think Tim Curry. That's what I think, and yeah, but here it's definitely Tim Curry. I don't know. I feel like Clue is him at the peak of his powers, where like the manic energy and everything.
Yeah, I
is
think
fully
so.
on display there. But
It's like
Curry,
who
I'm never gonna be sad to see him.
Burgess Meredith. Is he the penguin? Is he Mickey or is he grumpy old man? What's your Burgess Meredith era?
Or is he? I guess Twilight Zone era and Penguin era are roughly at the same time. So
Grant Heslov plays Richard, who is Peter's assistant. So he also
absolutely seen this person in a movie. That's what he is. There is a movie you have seen him play a bit part in, almost assuredly.
I agree, but his credits aren't as extensive as I thought. But real quick, Andrew, quick pause. Are you on his Wikipedia page?
I am. This filmography is not correct.
His picture, does he remind you of anyone? Like a bizarro version of anyone?
I don't know.
You're going to get mad at me.
I'm going to get mad, aren't I?
I don't think he looks like him, like I would confuse the two for each other. But in this picture, he looks like Edward Norton. But not like I would confuse him on the street, but he looks like someone playing Edward Norton. He looks like Edward Norton's with a different ethnicity. I don't know what his ethnicity is, but he looks just like a slightly different. Do you see it? I'm not crazy.
I'm going to allow it.
Maybe the goatee is doing a lot of work, but in that picture, I don't think in the movie.
To allow it.
But in that picture,
we're moving on.
Edward Norton with Steve Buscemi's eyes, because this dude has a set of peepers.
Not
on
Steve
him.
Buscemi eyes. I draw the line there.
You don't think he has Steve Buscemi eyes?
Not there, no.
Okay, all right.
Steve
all right.
Buscemi's eyes are way more unsettling.
Okay, so you're saying this filmography is incomplete? Yeah, he's been in a ton of stuff.
Yeah,
well, it's just his producing and writing. It's not his acting credits. I
it's
see.
producing and writing, and then there's act. But even his acting roles are a little bit more limited than I thought. But between stuff like True Lies, Congo, Black Sheep, Enemy of the State, like there's enough stuff where I think in the 90s there, somebody probably saw him in something.
Does a lot of stuff with George Clooney, including producing and writing. So, a bit of a Renaissance man on the filmmaking front. And his character here really doesn't want to go to the jungle. Really just wants to stay home in the city. Always wants to leave. And you just look at him and you're like, you're not going to make it to the credits of this movie. And if that was your thought, you would be correct. He does meet his end. Also at the hands of these gray gorillas.
The gray gorillas.
Is this what it feels like to be you on this podcast?
No. Maybe. A little bit. I don't know.
Andrew, speaking of, you've seen him in something. Joe Don Baker plays RB Travis, the CEO of Travacom, and he's a angry capitalist businessman. Once his team goes dark, he wants Laura Linney to go check on them, but mostly recover the diamonds that he needs for his next big innovation and for profits and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's very clear what he's motivated by, and Laura Linney as Karen does call him out on it several times and eventually stick it to him, which is very satisfying at the end. But Jordan Baker he has a look about him. I mean, he is most known for Walking Tall, the original, the lead role back in the 70s, but goes on to have a really long career, a lot of character work stuff, a lot of comedic roles, pops up in small roles in a lot of comedic films that most people are probably going to be familiar with, things like Joe Dirt, and I don't have his filmography in front of me. What else is he in, Andrew?
Joe Don Baker?
Yeah.
Walking Tall is probably the
I already
original
said
thing he was
that
known
one,
for.
Andrew.
You already said it. So he's been in nothing else.
Okay. Mars Attacks, alum of the show.
Alum of the show. GoldenEye.
He's in
Played
2
Jack
James Bond movies and 2 different Bond eras playing a different character. That's got to be, he's probably not the only person who's done that, but it's got to be a short list.
He's in not just in the two movies. He's in GoldenEye and he's in Tomorrow Never Dies. Both.
Oh,
those ones he's
they
the
are
same
both
character.
Brosnan. Okay, they're both.
But
Pierce
then he's
Brosnan,
also in
excuse
The
me.
Living Daylights as a different character.
There.
No,
Okay,
no.
I knew. Okay, so he
No.
is in two different. So he's in 3 Bond movies, 2 Brosnan, 1
T-Doll.
Timothy Dalton. Thank you. All 3 times different characters, or in the Brosnan ones is he the same character?
No, the Brosnan ones he's the same character.
Okay.
In the Dalton one he's a different character.
Interesting.
But essentially
Fun.
the same type of character. No, not really. He's the villain in Living Daylights. Yeah, never mind. Not the same character at all. Also was on TV for a long time. I mean, you can look up stuff. He's been all sorts of places. But yeah, Walking Tall is clearly the big thing he was known for, but you can just look at his thing. He's been in tons of classics. Charlie Varick was a good one in the 70s with Walter Matthau before he became Grumpy Old Men. Stuff like The Natural. Then you start getting into the late 80s, early 90s. You get Living Daylights, you get Cape Fear, you get Congo, GoldenEye, Joe Dirt. The classic,
Classic.
What
Yeah.
a career.
Andrew, that covers our main cast. I think the main roles that we should be talking about, but a few shout outs here. Joey Pants is in this movie. Joe Pantoliano is sort of the first guide they come across when they land in Africa. He's in multiple scenes, but for some reason is uncredited. This is relatively early in his career, but it's like the same year as Bad Boys, so I don't know why he doesn't even receive a credit, but it's classic 90s Joey Pants. Got the earring and all. Always love to see him. Bruce Campbell is in the opening scenes of this movie, something that I think we will be talking about when we move on to scenes. We also have alum of the show, Adewale Akinnuye Agbaje. We talked about him on our Suicide Squad episode because he plays Killer Croc, and I made it a point to learn how to pronounce his name properly then, and I think I was able to remember it. But he's Monroe's deputy, so a few key scenes there. But I just want to shout out those key players.
I do
great
also
job.
want to shout out one more. I want to shout out Delroy Lindo because he's got one of my favorite comedic scenes that won't be my favorite scene, but I definitely will be talking about it.
Okay.
Go
ahead and talk. What's the scene, Andrew?
It's the sesame cake scene. He's that guy.
Oh, of
the guy they're
course,
talking
of course,
to.
of course.
Yeah. Stop. I'm sorry.
Have some.
But, stop eating my sesame cake. Tim Curry literally spits it back out. It's so gross. But
What a bizarre scene, because he's so insistent that they try it, but then he yells at, I guess he's calling out Tim Curry specifically to not eat it. Like he's offering it to all of them, but like not you.
Anyway, you look at his filmography.
And then like they give him the money and he puts it in a brown paper bag and then staples it close. Like what a weird detail.
I love it though. I just absolutely love it because it's needless. It's needless specific stuff that just no reason to be there.
Yeah.
But you can look at his filmography. Just a lot of character actors showing up in all sorts of stuff. Malcolm X, The Hard Way, this Broken Arrow, Get Shorty, Gone in 60 Seconds. He's all over the place. But here he's just got like one scene. I think it's literally one scene. I don't think it's anything else. But he's really, really funny here. And I think it's just a fun shout out there.
Andrew, let's continue talking about the scenes of this movie, but let's talk about the best scene of the film, or at least our personal favorite. So in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Congo?
So I'm going to be going towards the end of our film here, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily the last scene of the movie, but it's definitely probably the climax. So the beginning of the movie, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit, where a mystery threat is revealed, and we don't really know what that threat is until much later in the film, until it is eventually revealed it is these gray gorillas. They eventually find out that the gray gorillas were bred specifically to guard this mine. But eventually the gray gorillas got so smart they overthrew the people that created them essentially to protect the mine and took it for themselves. So at the mine, again, King Solomon's Mines, this is a little switched around. This is the lost city of Zinj. This is the thing that Tim Curry's character, Homolka, has been looking for his entire life. There's actually a look on his face when he finds out that it's real that I actually think is like it's the moment where like I realize, oh, he's not up to anything. He's truly, honestly, just been looking for this place his entire life. Like, there's this scene earlier where like he sees Amy at like an exposition, like a discussion, like a presentation,
a TED talk,
and he like a TED talk, an Amy talk, if you will. But it's he's got the ring on with the eye on it, and like he looks at Amy and he looks at his ring, and he's got this diabolical look on his face, and you're just like, what is this guy up to? You're like, this is like, so you're just assuming there's this other shoe dropping. And then you realize that he just knew that Amy knew where that ring came from. That's it. That's all it really was. And so he gets there and he's truly like, I've been looking my whole life for this. And then he collects some diamonds and gets ripped apart by apes. But, which is, I guess that's exactly how he imagined the story ending. But this leads to, as they're picking up the diamonds, they look around and they're in this interesting set. It's basically got all these kind of coves off to the side, like, and as they're walking around picking up these things, catacombs would be underground. I
said catacombs to my credit, Andrew. I mean, it's
above combs. But as he's picking up these diamonds, I'm gonna allow it.
Okay.
But
the
gray gorillas, the gorillas start appearing like out of these little niches, coves, whatever you want to call them.
Doggacombs.
They kind of realize,
established. I want to call them doggacombs, Andrew.
Doggacombs. All right, fine. The gray gorillas emerge from the doggacombs, and this, folks, this is
why you listen. This is why you're here.
I remember you said that to me once. You said something, and it was like a really bad pun. And I think I even said, I was just like, ugh, no. And you were like, these are the jokes, Andrew. I remember that line almost any time we make a really awful joke. I'm just like, these are the jokes, kids.
These are the jokes.
I'm pretty sure that was you.
Yes, because I am always, it's from Monsters Inc. I'm quoting Monsters Inc. every time I say it. Mike Wazowski at the end of it.
But anyway. So as Homolka is picking up these diamonds, the gray gorillas emerge and they realize that protecting these diamonds is basically their job. It's the reason they keep people away from the mine. It's the reason they don't want people at the mine. It's literally the reason they exist, essentially. If you get too close to the mine, they kill you. And
did you say mind?
Mine.
Oh, okay.
Because Chris, a mine is a terrible thing to waste.
Okay.
But it's so anyway, Homolka starts collecting diamonds. That leads to him getting killed by the apes. So Monroe, Karen is Laura Linney's character, and Peter, they go a little bit deeper into the mine, and that's where they find the bodies of the people from the beginning of the movie. And they find a giant diamond. Basically, at this point, the gorillas are encroaching, and they don't know what to do. This is all kind of, and then in the background of this, a volcano is about to erupt. So it's really quite an auspicious finale, or climax of this movie. So basically, you've got these encroaching, vicious apes, because the whole thing is gorillas are not supposed to be violent by nature, but these ones are. They're aggressive, and they realize, again, it's the purpose. It's what they're supposed to do. So, in that moment where they find the bodies of Jeffrey and Charles from the earlier in the movie, which we'll talk about, they have a giant diamond that Laura Linney's character is able to put into this laser, and is basically just able to start just lasering these gorillas to pieces. Basically, literally, just cutting them to pieces with this laser. In the background of this, the volcano erupts. Guys, this is what happens in the movie. I'm not kidding. This is legitimately how this movie comes to a finale. So you've literally got them escaping out of the mine using a laser to cut apart super vicious, angry gorillas. While lava starts to flood into this doggercomb, and the gorillas are starting to die in the process. But in this sequence, you get every single piece of ridiculous pulp science adventure you could possibly have. And
running
it all comes
from
together.
lava,
lasers, angry
collapsing building. Yeah, it's everything.
Collapsing buildings, collapsing ruins. It's all there. It's like you said. It's a pulp adventure. It's a pulp classic adventure with sci-fi tinged all over it, and it's very, very cool. So for me, that's when when the lava sets the Dogger Combs on fire. I was like, this movie's on fire.
This is exactly where I thought this movie was heading the entire time. Not surprised.
Yeah, at no point did I suspect. I'm like, clearly he's got a diamond. That means there's going to be a laser later. Like it has to mean that.
I so don't understand what this is. So they established it at the very beginning, like Bruce Campbell put the diamond in a laser, and he uses that to fire it. It's didn't they do the same thing in Batman and Robin? Isn't he kind of get diamonds to do some kind of laser? But in this movie, it's a technology communications company that is developing this. Andrew, am I supposed to understand, one, how a diamond makes a laser that can cut things in half, and two, how that's related to communications? Because I don't understand.
No, I don't either.
Okay. It's so weird. This is one of those movies, like I said, I saw it a lot as a kid, and when I think back on it after not seeing it, I always forget plot elements, but I remember, like, there's a finale with ugly apes, and they get cut by a laser. Where do those lasers come from? Is it a booby trap in the Dogger Combs? Like that. I never remember how all the elements fit together, but there's so many bizarre visuals in this movie. This is a great pick because they all come together at this wild climax. And one of my notes here is I took it as they're escaping. There's lava flowing, a lot of green screen. It all looks pretty good, but you just look at this set, what is very clearly a set, getting destroyed, and you get that feeling like, man, like they don't make them like this anymore, and they probably never will. The amount of effort to construct a movie set, film the movie there, and then destroy that set for your climax is probably a lost art at this point. Not that it'll literally never happen again, but certainly not commonplace. You would definitely do it CG. I'm not saying that's bad. You can make it a good looking movie with the CG. That's not the point. It's just, I can't help but look at this and be like, this is a bygone era of movie making.
It is indeed. I think that's another thing that definitely, like, this movie cost what, $50 million to make, which, it's not quite the $30 million movie, but like just that idea of like a $50 million blockbuster, they just don't do them like this anymore.
Andrew, for my favorite scene, I think I'm gonna go to the complete opposite end of this film and start at the beginning. I really enjoy the opening of this movie with Bruce Campbell and his crew in the jungle, sending their satellite feed back to headquarters, and they are telling the home base that they found diamonds that they were looking for. And he does the demonstration. He puts it to a laser. He shoots it at a bush and lights it on fire. I don't understand this technology, but everyone's very excited about these diamonds that they found. And then they disconnect, and we stay with the team. We see them stumble upon the lost city, and Bruce Campbell, one of his colleagues, goes into the lost city, goes into you said it earlier, not ruins? Ruins. Goes into the ruins, and he's out there waiting for him for a while. He gets impatient. He's like, come on, we gotta go. An eyeball is thrown out and lands next to Bruce Campbell. Like, this goes 0 to 60 so fast. Like, you knew, like, the guy was in danger, but that eyeball, pretty bold. And then Andrew, God, Frank Marshall, he knew what he had in Bruce Campbell. We never see the gorillas here. We hear them roar. Bruce Campbell turns around, looks straight down the barrel of the camera. His head's at like a 45-degree angle, and he just screams like only Bruce Campbell can. Super over the top, super campy. It's why you hired the guy for one scene. Like, this is a perfect use of Bruce Campbell. As much as I love his movies and his starring roles, it's him adding a little bit of flavor to your movie, like in almost every Sam Raimi film, that he's just made a career out of. It's so good. I'm kind of fast. Like, Bruce Campbell has the looks of a leading man. He looks like a movie star, but he's just a little too goofy, over the top, and campy. But if you use that correctly, it's gonna make your movie sing, and he does it here.
Absolutely. That scene of him like staring down the camera and screaming, it could have been straight from Evil Dead 2. Like
100%.
it's just perfect. Like it's just it sells exactly what's happening. It works exactly like it's supposed to do. And yeah, the movie is all the better for it. So yeah, if it's expert casting, I don't know how Bruce Campbell ends up in Congo. I don't quite know the process of how we get there, but the movie is all the better for it. And this scene is, like you said, it sets the tone. It creates the threat. Something strange is in this jungle. So that's looming in the background of everything else that happens. So no matter, the travel issues we're having as we go between countries, the stuff with Amy getting back, all of that is different pieces that are all in the background of this knowledge we have, but they don't. Well, I guess Laura Linney does. That there's something there that we don't know what it is, but we know that something is there. And, that adds like this kind of cloud over the whole proceedings of the movie, even as Amy is like excited and being back in the jungle, like all those things. All of it's in the background of this. Oh, there's something there. And that's just storytelling, man. It works. It's effective.
There's a big chunk of this movie in like the first third or so where they are, we assemble the team in America and then they're making the journey. They land in Africa, you got Joey Pants there, and they're sort of getting almost like smuggled to their destination. Like you get the feeling that like it's not quite legal how they're trying to travel there or whatever. And we have this series of events that #BP I find very hard to follow. I don't know the countries they're going through, the politics, the war, like it's strange, but it's all just sort of set dressing to line up these set pieces and action sequences. And there's a very good one I want to highlight where they are making their final plane ride to the Congo. And they are flying over another country's territory they're not supposed to be, and these people are trying to shoot them out of the sky. Again, I don't know the country, I don't know the motivation, I don't know. But we got an action set piece here. So our whole crew is up in this plane, and they realize they're not going to be able to land. They're going to have to jump out of this plane. But they got to make sure they don't get blown up first. So the ground crew is shooting missiles, and then they move to heat-seeking missiles. Specifically, the kind that only exist in movies, I gotta imagine. I'm no weapons expert, but they shoot these things up at them, and Laura Linney's quick thinking. She knocks out the door of the plane. This is where you get some clues that she's got a more decorated past than we might know. She gets a flare gun. She shoots the flare. The heat-seeking missile stops tracking the big jet airplane and goes to the flare and explodes when it contacts the flare. Like, there's no way this would happen in real life, but it's a very cool setup for a scene in your movie. Arnie Hudson sees what she's doing. He gets a flare gun of his own. They're both shooting flares out the door. It's very creative, very fun, very cool action set piece. Eventually, they got to jump out the plane. And most of these people are just civilians that are not prepared to do this. In particular, I really like Tim Curry here. He's like, he knows he doesn't have the nerves to jump out the plane, so he tells him, "Push me, please." And like he's still holding on to the plane. He goes, "Harder, please." Like you got to shove him out. Arnie Hudson jumps out with Amy the gorilla. Amy doesn't have a parachute. Amy is just holding on to Arnie Hudson. Only he has the parachute.
I don't know. I don't know if the implication is she was like strapped to Ernie Hudson.
I
like,
thought it was just like arm strength, but that.
No, I assume that because she's knocked out, she's not awake. Like they
that's true.
Totally, they did something. So I can only assume
they just used the gorilla
like,
harness they had.
To him.
Yeah,
like just attached her to Ernie Hudson. But yeah, in that moment, I was just like, "How's this gorilla holding on?"
Just thinking of the stunt double that day, his day of work, to jump out of a plane with a big gorilla suit strapped around him is hilarious. But of course, after they're all jump out of the plane, a missile does hit the plane, explodes midair. Just a good action sequence, Andrew.
The bit when Tim Curry is like, "Push me." Push harder. Like that reminded me. I went to Inks Lake, I think way back when. It's a state park or a park out in Texas. And there's this big old rock face you could climb up and jump off the top of. And in a moment of strange stupidity, I was like, "Oh, I bet I could do that." And so I got up there, got all the way up there, got to the top, looked down the edge, and was just like, what? Like, I got all the way up there, and the guy was just like, all right, man. Because there was like a guy that was there kind of like making sure everything was clear before somebody else jumped. And like, that was the whole job. And he was like, all right. I was like, count me down. And he's like, we're 3, 2, 1. And I didn't jump. And I was like, do that again. And he was like, 3, 2, 1, jump. And I was like, one more time. And he goes, 3, 2, 1. And then I finally jumped. But I was like, same kind of energy there. It was the thing.
How high would you estimate that jump was?
I don't know, 20, 30 feet.
I see those in movies all the time. You know, people jumping off a cliff and they do like the pencil drop into the water. Looks terrifying. I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to bring myself to do it. Yeah, I bet.
It's like that thing where you're like, oh, I could do like a cool move on my way down. No.
Nope. You try to do any rotations. I'm down. Belly flopping and
I'm landed straight on my back and breaking my spine. That's how that works, right?
Yep. There's another action set piece that it's one of the things that stuck with me. One of the scenes I definitely remember this movie where they are crossing the river on their like basically canoes at night.
Oh yeah,
and they get attacked by hippos. My God, hippos!
Like, I don't know if you guys know this, people. Hippos are terrifying.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, there's probably a point as a kid, like your only connection to hippos is like hungry hippos, and you think they're like cute animals you see at the zoo. But like once you learn the true nature of them and how aggressive and violent they are, and how powerful their jaws. I think their jaws open like almost 180 degrees, if I'm not mistaken, and have the crushing power of jaws of life, whatever. I don't know. They're very, very powerful, and extremely territorial. Cross hippo infested waters at night is nightmarish. Like, this scene is terrifying. The hippos look great. Not real hippos. We should say Stan Winston and his crew are responsible for the gorillas in this movie and these hippos. This is the second movie in a row now we've got to talk about him, because his crew also did Lake Placid, we talked about last week.
Yep.
And it all looks great, and it's all terrifying. Stan Winston is like the R-rated Jim Henson as far as like puppets and animatronics are concerned.
Terminator responsible for stuff there as well. Yeah, you can look at this thing. There's no shortage of things that he has been involved with. Did a lot of stuff with James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, Tim Burton, all sorts of things. Yeah, I always joke that you could make a Hungry Hippos movie that would just be like Jaws with hippos. Like, you could just call it Hungry Hippos, because hippos are absolutely horrifying. You ever want to see like terror in like a palatable way? Just look up a video of a hippo eating a watermelon. Like, it opens its mouth the entire way, and then they just drop the whole watermelon in, and then it just crushes it and eats it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a watermelon. It will do that to a human with the same power. You don't survive against a hippo, folks.
So their jaws are like as powerful as Rhea Ripley's thighs.
Yes, but unlike Rhea Ripley, I don't think a hippo would carry me like a baby.
God, I wish. Andrew, a few
turning into a different show, folks.
A few notes I had here. Ernie Hudson, Ghostbusters. We talked about that. There's a leech on a penis at one point. That's weird. But I love this scene where they're all getting into the boats, and Peter starts singing California Dreamin' to Amy, like, to help put her to sleep. And then everyone there, like the whole expedition, which is mostly like African natives, people that just met, join in and start singing with him. That's a nice little scene in the middle of this movie.
It is. Hey, we all know California Dreamin'. What is that, the Mamas and the Papas?
I don't know, Andrew.
It's not Katy Perry.
It's not Katy Perry.
Mamas and the Papas is the best known version of it. It's been probably recorded by many people, but
there's this insane scene at the very end of the movie, Andrew. So Laura Linney, she calls out Joe Don Baker, the CEO, before she makes the expedition out there. She's like, I'm going out there to check on these people, right? Because Bruce Campbell is actually his son and used to be romantically involved with Laura Linney's character. She's like, I'm going to check on him, right? That's the motivation. And he's like, yeah, of course. And while you're there, recover the diamonds. But yeah, make sure they're okay. So at the very end, she tells him, I have a status on your son. And he's like, did you get the diamonds? And is totally not concerned with what she has to say about Bruce Campbell. And she's like, I warned you if you only cared about these diamonds. And Andrew, she uses the diamond to fire the laser into outer space and destroy the satellite.
Yeah.
And that's not the most ridiculous thing in this movie, probably. Like, by this point in the movie, I'm like, sure. Yeah, okay. Whatever.
Why not? Why not?
Andrew, this movie is bonkers, but you know what? It's a good time. It's fun to watch. I'm pretty fascinated with it. I mean, it is definitely, well into like pre 9/11 territory. Like, this is just a bonkers thing. Very 90s. But you look at like the creative team and the cast, like, man, they really put a lot into this. But I feel like probably before it opened wide, they were like, I don't know, guys, this probably didn't come together. Like, I'm not sure this is going to fare very well. The reviews are horrible mostly. They're trashing it. If for some reason it overperforms at the box office, it's a pretty big hit. It continues to do well, like on home video. Everyone sees it on cable, and everyone like embraces this movie. I feel like there's this scene in Moneyball where Brad Pitt like can't watch the game, is looking down, and then he hears the crack of the bat and he looks up suddenly. I feel like that's like Frank Marshall like on Friday morning, like opening the newspaper to see like the box office numbers, or I guess Sunday, seeing the weekend numbers, like what it made, how much people, or what, like you know what I mean? Like it ends up being, I don't know, almost as greater than the sum of its parts, but its parts are pretty good. Something about this movie connects with people for some reason, and it's hard to even put my finger on it, other than this is just a bonkers movie you got to see to really appreciate.
I think that's about right. I mean, it's one of those things that's just like, and we had George of the Jungle around the same time. Gorillas were in. I don't know, but it is a weird, like, it's a wild movie, and it's one of those things that, like,
Mighty Joe Young, is that also around this time?
I don't know. I didn't research that statement before I said it. But it's a wild time because, like, this is
Dunstan checks in. Now I'm just getting like 90s monkey movies.
That's a chimpanzee, man. Show some respect.
Andrew, I know there's differences. I'm sorry. I'm still a 5-year-old. They're all monkeys to me. I'm sorry. Mighty Joe Young is 1998.
19 what?
98. So, monkeys,
Congo
primates
starts the trend.
They
continues.
They were they're like dinosaurs in the 90s. Like, there's a genuine wave of like primate movies.
I guess. But it's a wild movie because it's one of those things that, what was this rated when it came out? Was it rated R? I feel like it has to. Release, was it rated R? What was Congo rated?
I don't know. I'm just trying to remember which one has a monkey playing baseball.
Congo was rated PG-13. So, but like at the same time, I don't know that it was like it's clearly meant to like appeal to like adults. It's meant to be like an adult kind of movie.
1996.
All right, so Congo starts the trend.
Starring Matt LeBlanc. Sorry, I'm done. All right.
But
Ed has a 6% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh my gosh.
Look, are we gonna do Monkey Month, Andrew?
Apparently.
Okay. We'll talk about it off air.
It's odd to me because you look back at the 90s and movies like this, and like they're clearly meant for like adults to go watch Congo. But like on its face, you would assume a movie about killer gorillas would be meant for like everybody possible.
Yeah.
Like, so it's this time where like, you take something like it's like that idea of like horror. Horror is still meant to be like this teenage young adult thing. The idea is kind of persistent that like adults don't watch horror, like older people don't watch horror movies, which has been proven wrong again and again and again. You take something like The Substance, I think is a great example of like, oh, we can take this thing, but as long as you dress it up and you make it dramatic, you make it prestige, like, I still always come back to the fact that What Lies Beneath was in the top 10 grossing films for the year 2000, which is essentially a haunted house movie starring Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer, directed by Robert Zemeckis. Like, it is a prestige horror film.
The Sixth Sense is a ghost movie.
Yeah, like, these are movies that are presented just they're not presented as horror movies. They're essentially presented as dramas, but they do well. And so Congo, I don't really know how it was marketed, but it seems like a strange thing to exist. But at the same time, Michael Crichton's name, I assume plenty of adults knew his name. They knew his work, so they were probably interested in that regard. Jurassic Park, obviously, was just a few years before this. I don't know if that plays into the expectations or the hype at all. Just the idea is like, oh, the guy that wrote Jurassic Park also wrote the book for this? Why not? No lasers in Jurassic Park, I'll tell you that. But
maybe there should be.
There should be. I think there are now, but because now we're getting Jurassic Park 7. I'm sorry, Jurassic World 4. Jurassic Park 7.
We don't have time to get into that now, Andrew.
No, we don't. But anyway, it is just a strange movie. And like you said, it overestimated. Like they were expecting to get 13 to 15 million. It made over 24. It made almost 25 million for the number one, ahead of alum of the show, Casper, but then was overtaken in its second weekend by alum of the show, Batman Forever. Apparently, we've covered the summer of '95 a
Very
lot
thoroughly.
on the show. And then it ended up grossing 152 million worldwide off a $50 million budget, which, that's not gangbusters, but at the time, that's pretty high.
I mean, it had a long tail, does well on home video, has cult status now. The boutique label Vinegar Syndrome, one of my favorites, just 1 or 2 years ago, put out a prestige 4K release of Congo.
It was just last year.
Art book and stuff. I mean, Andrew, I kind of want to buy it. I think next time it's on sale, I'm going to pick it up. Just because this movie's it's a heck of a thing.
It came out, Chris, it says here, November 2nd of last year. So it is...
Okay, very fresh.
Like, brand new. Like, it is... I'm not going to lie to you, Chris. I kind of also want to buy it. Dude, looking at the 1995 box office is so strange. Like, I'm looking at the movies that were number one every weekend. The first weekend is Dumb and Dumber. Then it's Legends of the Fall for 4 weekends in a row.
Wow. I didn't think that movie was that big.
Billy Madison. then the Brady Bunch movie for 2 weeks. Then The Man of the House, which is the Jonathan Taylor Thomas Chevy Chase comedy. Then Outbreak in March goes for 3 weekends. Tommy Boy gets a lone weekend the first weekend of April. Then we get Bad Boys for 2 weeks. Then While You Were Sleeping for 2 weeks. Then French Kiss, Crimson Tide, Die Hard 3 each get a week. Then Casper gets 2 weeks. Congo gets a week. Batman Forever only gets 1 weekend, but makes 52 million in that weekend, which was the highest weekend debut in June for a summer release, and of all time.
In June for a summer release? Are there non-summer releases in June?
Hey, it's not summer everywhere in June. But Batman Forever was the first film to ever gross more than $50 million in 1 weekend and had the highest weekend debut of 1995. So those are a little bit broader range there.
Still, but the variety in all those movies you just listed is incredible.
Batman Forever itself is unseated 1 week later by Pocahontas.
Huh.
And then Apollo 13 comes out and carries it for 4 weeks. Then it's Waterworld for 2 weeks. Dangerous Minds for a week. Then Mortal Kombat for 3 weekends. Then, I didn't even know this, To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. That's 2 weekends number one at the box office.
What a movie, wow.
Then Seven gets 4 weekends. Then the next 3 weekends are Get Shorty. Then we get a wild end of the year here. Ace Ventura gets a lone 1 weekend at the box office in Ace Ventura 2, rather. And then 1 week later, GoldenEye comes out. And then 1 week later, a little movie called Toy Story comes out and holds it for 3 weeks. Then a little unknown movie called Jumanji comes out, and Jumanji gets a weekend. And then a movie I don't even know if I've heard of, called Waiting to Exhale, gets the Christmas weekend. And then the January 1st weekend, Toy Story reclaims number one in its 6th weekend of release.
Waiting to Exhale is a film directed by Forrest Whitaker. Had no idea he ever directed a movie. Andrew,
Me either.
I love
That's nuts. That whole year is crazy.
I love that year. I'm very familiar with most of those movies. Like I said, I love the variety
We've covered
at
a
the
lot
box
of them.
office. What really strikes me is I think maybe 15% of those movies are certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Not exaggerating. I think a handful of those movies reviewed well, but they clearly all made money.
Made money.
What a time.
It really was a different time. It really was people had to see your movie to know it was bad. Like it was a weird thing. Like it's a strange thing. Like truly, like people talk about how like Rotten Tomatoes, people say it's one of the most harmful things to modern films because people will just see something as rotten and then not go see it. So if you're going to overcome that, you either have to have word of mouth work in your favor, or it has to be something that everybody's like jazzed to see. Something that like, like Mario, take Super Mario, for example, reviewed pretty middle of the road, but made tons of money because it was a Super Mario movie that you could take your whole family to see. Which, are things that help. Kids' movies tend to be a lot more forgiving in that regard as far as making lots of money because parents are like, fantastic, here's a movie I can take my kids to go see. But just, that run of movies in 95 is very, very strange.
It was a different time, Andrew, but it was a time that gave us a movie like
was indeed
Congo. Ah, boy, Andrew, I'm having a blast, and I got to do at least one more time. Big animal! Oh no, I can't. You know what month it is. Oh, that hurt, and I regret trying.
That hurt, Chris. that hurt.
Ooh, we got one more movie to cover. You probably know what it is. We've talked about it. Anaconda. Which I guess we never really addressed the silverback gorilla in the room. That Congo isn't really a big animal month, or a big animal movie, I should say, in the same way the other movies we are. Like in GWC, the sharks are larger than normal. Lake Placid, about a giant crocodile. Anaconda, about a giant snake. All the gorillas in this movie are the size a gorilla is supposed to be. But you know what, Andrew? A gorilla is a big animal. So I think it works. I don't know. If you have a problem with it, let us know in the Discord. Go on. Hop on in.
No. Or don't. Keep it to yourself, man. We got enough problems.
Yeah. You know what time it is, Andrew? It's time for the hot news segment that everyone is talking about. It's Ask Andrew, where I get to just ask you anything, and you've got to give an answer. It's a developing segment. Let's put it that way. Andrew, I have a question for you, though.
Yes.
Well, first, this isn't the question, but I want to ask you a quick. The band POD, you're familiar, yes? Do you know what that stands for, POD? Again, this isn't the question, but it's related, so.
Payable on delivery?
Payable on death.
Death, yes.
Yeah, so they're a Christian metal band.
Sorry,
a lot of Christian themes.
I got it crossed with COD, which was cash on delivery.
There you go.
So
POD, payable on death. Referring to our sins. That's the name of the band. So the name of the band is POD though. Like that's what's on their albums. That's P.O.D. But it's well known amongst fans that it stands for payable on death. Now, Andrew,
all 7 of you.
Here is your question.
Okay.
Okay. The name of their 5th studio album is Payable on Death. My question is that a self-titled album?
You mind if I check something first?
I think you should tell us what you're checking, but that's fine. You can check something, but what's helping you come up with an answer? What's helping you formulate an answer?
There's a band called Chicago.
Okay.
That was originally called the Chicago Transit Authority. That was they changed their name to the Chicago Transit Authority in 1968, and then changed their name to just Chicago in 1969. Now, in 1969, they released an album called the Chicago Transit Authority, which is the first album by Chicago. And then their second album is just called Chicago. Now, retroactively, those two albums have become to be known as Chicago 1 and Chicago 2. And pretty much every single album they have put out since is Chicago number. Now, the problem is there are issues with this. Because like it skips from Chicago 3 to Chicago 4 because they called like a live album Chicago 4 or something. Anyway, I would be inclined to say no, because the name of the band is POD. That is the name of the band.
Right.
Like, same way that Chicago's band name is not Chicago Transit Authority, it is Chicago, even though they originally started as Chicago Transit Authority. So I think Chicago's naming system for their albums is full of crap. Because they clearly just doesn't line up. But anyway, I would say no, because the name of the band is POD. That's what it says on the album covers. That's what it says on everything. It says POD. Payable on Death may be what it stands for, but that's not what the band is called.
Andrew, I gotta say, I think I agree with you. I think I would not refer to this as a self-titled album. Now, Wikipedia, whoever wrote this, disagrees with us. The Wikipedia page for the album Payable on Death says, Payable on Death is the self-titled fifth studio album by Christian nu metal band POD. But that sentence is like contradicting itself as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm with you, Andrew. I would not consider this, and I'm sure, believe it or not, I'm not in POD fan forums. I would imagine as they discuss albums, they just call this album Payable on Death. They don't call it self-titled. They don't call it POD. Like it's there's a clear distinction there. But Andrew, I guess the wider discussion I want to have here is, how do you feel in general about self-titled albums? And I can share, some of my thoughts here. I think your first album being self-titled, cool. I get it. It's your debut. This is your first batch of songs. And this is probably the most common use of a self-titled album is the debut. And then as you release more albums, they all get a title. That, I'm cool with self-titled albums. What I don't particularly like is when you do a string of self-titled albums. You mentioned Chicago as an example. Led Zeppelin, what is it, 1 through 4? The first 4 albums are self-titled, because then your fans have to call it 1, 2, 3, 4. So just call it that. Like, you've got to come up with it's like when WrestleMania stopped doing numbers in the logo. Like, we all call it by the number anyway because we have to call it something. Just make it part of the official name. And then the form of self-title that I really don't like is whenever you do the Beatles thing, and the White Album is technically a self-titled album that it's just called the Beatles, but everyone calls it the White Album because the cover is all white. And then bands have copied that, Metallica, the Black Album is, a self-titled album. Yeah, Weezer, like half their albums are self-titled albums for no rhyme or reason. Just every now and then there's a predominant color on the front and the fans are supposed to call it by that color. Just name the album the Green Album or whatever color.
Oh, come on. Don't do this to us.
Don't.
I got better things to do with my time.
I guess in general, I'm not a huge fan of self-titled albums, but it has their place, but I don't like the way it's utilized very often. What about you, Andrew? How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I agree with what you're saying. Like, for me, as far as you want to call your album self-titled album, I don't care. It's going to come down to, did you actually make a good album or not?
Sure.
Which sometimes, no, you didn't. It's that simple. But yeah, like Chicago's a really interesting one because a lot of their albums are like Chicago 4 is actually a live album. That's not called Chicago 4.
That's
it's
so
called
weird.
Chicago at Carnegie Hall. But because it was the 4th album released by Chicago, it retroactively became known as Chicago 4.
What do you mean retroactively? Like what changes?
Like, it was released as Chicago Live at Carnegie Hall.
Okay.
But then in 1972, they released an album and called it Chicago 5, even though it was only their 4th studio album.
Oh, God, I hate that, Andrew.
So, yes, truly, honestly, Chicago is the worst when it comes to this. And then they have one album in 1978 that isn't called Chicago anything. It's just called Hot Streets. And then, so it is, so before that, is Chicago 11, and after that is Chicago 13.
Okay.
But in between is not Chicago 12, it's Hot Streets.
And
It's stupid.
I am now looking at their discography. Chicago 11 is XI Roman numerals, as they've all been up until then. Hot Streets is 12. Then Chicago 13 is the number 13. 14 goes
And then it
back
goes
to
back
Roman
to
numerals, and then back to numbers. And then Chicago 19 is followed by 21.
Or Chicago 20.
But it says, but it's called 21? Is the 7th? Oh my God. 21 is the 17th
That's the
studio album
21st overall
and
album.
21st overall. But what are we doing? This is so convoluted.
Yeah, and then you get all these different things. So Chicago, it's the thing is like Chicago became known for doing the numbers, but they wanted to include everything. So like literally, and now what they do is they do subtitles. So now you have like Chicago 37, Chicago Christmas, and you have Chicago 38, Born for This Moment, or
God.
Chicago 36 now, and it's all so dumb. It's
Andrew,
really
I hate
dumb.
this. I hate this.
I hate it.
This is
So
the
to
worst
me-
example of self-titled album.
Oh yeah,
naming convention
absolutely.
I've seen.
Chicago is absolutely the worst at this. You're the inspiration for all the misery in my life, Chicago. That's what I'm telling you. But
Chicago's the worst offender of this, followed by Weezer. I don't like what Weezer does
Yes.
with their colors.
the Beatles, Metallica, whatever, all one self-titled that people
think-
kind of describe a different name to.
Were Beatles
whatever, I
the
guess.
first to do it? Because
I'm certain the Beatles were not the first to have a self-titled album. It might be the first one that
Well,
got assigned like a color to it.
yeah, that's what
like a nickname.
I guess to have a self-titled.
I would-
Now who do you think
yeah.
started calling it the White Album? Fans or the Beatles?
I think fans must have, or maybe even retailers, because like, did the
Yeah.
Beatles have another self-titled album? Let's see. No. Yeah, the Beatles. What? So when did it become known as the White Album? And like, yeah, like the history of it makes sense. Like they wanted something really minimal after the Sgt. Pepper's album cover, which was insane.
Right.
Yeah. When did it become? That's a great question. Like, when did it become when did it become known as like the White Album? That's a great question. I don't know. That's something I got to look up. Generally speaking, I would say if you want to self-title your album, I don't care. Whatever. I think it's weird when you do it like after you've been a band for like 50 years, especially if you've released 36 other self-titled albums. I think at that point you're just full of it and you need to get over yourselves. But especially when you haven't had like when like the only classic members left in Chicago were the horn section that nobody knows your names, guys. People knew two members of Chicago, Terry Kath and Peter Cetera, both of which haven't been in the band for a very long time. Terry Kath, because he's dead. Look up how he died, folks. 2 is Peter Cetera, who left in like 88. So like, yeah, it's one of those things where it's definitely also attritioned off to the point that the band that's calling themselves Chicago, you're kind of like, are you though? Are you really? Like
Andrew,
a ship of Theseus, the ship of Chicago. Like, how many band members can you replace before it doesn't become the original band anymore?
I did a quick Google. I was trying to get to the bottom of when the White Album became known as the White Album. I came across, I mean, the source of this is just a random Reddit thread and someone saying like, people just started calling it that because they needed something to call it after it was released. But another comment on the same Reddit thread, I've got to read it to you here, Andrew. So someone asks, when did the White Album become known as the White Album? And this comment says, it's just a nickname. The same way Sgt. Pepper's is also known as the red, green, blue, yellow, brown, purple, tangerine album. That's good. That's good.
That's good.
That's good.
That's very good. That's very good. 10 out of 10. No notes.
Well, there it
That
is.
one.
Andrew's take on self-titled albums. And the official stance of Best of the Rest is that Payable on Death is not a self-titled album from POD. I know everyone's been wondering our hot take on it, and there it is. There you have it. And we'll be back next week as we talk about Anaconda, the movie from the 90s with Jennifer Lopez that spawned a franchise and is seemingly about to come back. We'll talk more about that next week. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony, and thanks to Mitch for the music. Follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. Check our show notes for the SoundCloud link, and check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Check, 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 1, 2. Check, check. Andrew, did you know I have a Polish friend that's a audio engineer?
Do you have a check one too?
Yeah. All right, ready to record a podcast with me, Andrew?
No, not after that.
A primatologist who's going to Africa to release the intelligent gorilla Amy into the wild.
It's literally the reason they exist, essentially. If you get too close to the mind, they kill you. And,
Did you say mind?
mine.
Oh, okay.
Because you know, Chris, a mine is a terrible thing to waste. Okay. But if you get too close to the mind,